Daniel Sports Center will give a college football bowl preview and prediction on the 2021 Armed Forces Bowl matchup between Missouri and Army. Both teams have had good seasons to this point. Should make for a good matchup here in the Armed Forces Bowl. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting out with your team trends. Missouri lost to Arkansas 17-34. That was in the last game of the regular season, so obviously tough loss there for the Tigers. But, this team has actually played very well in the month of November, especially after that Georgia loss. That was a tough loss there, 43-6. But, they had to win 2 of their last 3 games, and they beat South Carolina and beat Florida to even get to this 6-win threshold in the first place. So, huge credit to Missouri being able to rally over the past couple of weeks and get to that bowl game. And they've got a good opportunity to face off against a good Army team. Army, of course, did lose to Navy 13-17 this past weekend. So that was a tough loss there for Army against their rival in Navy. And Navy has somewhat struggled this season, only getting up to 4 wins. But either way, that's a huge win for Navy and for Army. Just a tough loss, obviously. But, this is still a pretty good football team, up to 8-4 on the season. You'll be on Wednesday, December 22nd in Fort Worth, Texas. And your kickoff time is 7 p.m. Central Time. Spread's going with Army here by 3.5 points. So the Black Knights are favored in this matchup, and your over-under is 58.5. So moderate to a higher scoring game is expected here between Missouri and Army. And your FPI is going as close as it can get. 50.9% is your current percentage, and it is pointing towards Army to win this game. In your series history, Missouri does lead at 3-1. So we've seen a couple of matchups here, but it was a long time ago the last time these two teams played each other. Last game was in 1982, and Missouri's won 2 straight ever since. Here's your stat comparison for this matchup. Missouri's got 29 points per game, 34 points allowed, 233 pass yards a game, 178 rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 216 passing, 229 for rushing. So something interesting here with Missouri is their defensive side is not quite as good as their offense. Their offense is pretty good overall. You got a great running back in Tyler Beatty, who's got over 1,600 rush yards on the season already and 14 touchdowns. And Bazilic, of course, he's had a decent season as well, 2,500 yards. But defensively, your rush defense is one of the worst in the SEC for sure. 229 rush yards allowed per game is not a very good stat line there. So that does concern me for Missouri. And the thing is this is a pretty terrible matchup in that area for Missouri because you're going up against one of the top rushing offenses in the country with Army. 286 rush yards a game is what the Black Knights have coming into this matchup. And obviously their passing game, 94 passers a game, so they're not a very heavy pass offense as well. If you look at their rushing offense, nearly 300 rush yards per game is what this Army football team has been averaging. So definitely something to mention there and something to watch out for. Army's got 33 points per game otherwise, 22 points allowed. And then for yards allowed, 208 passing, 111 for rushing. Some recent matchups as well. Missouri lost to Arkansas there 17-34, beat Florida 24-23 in overtime. And looking back at that game, if you didn't beat Florida in that game, you would not be in a bowl game right now. So obviously, both of those wins, especially South Carolina and Florida against decent football teams, were certainly huge to Missouri's chances of getting to a bowl game this season. Did lose to Georgia 6-43, but the Bulldogs are in the playoff and beat Vanderbilt there by 9 points, 37-28 on the road. As for Army, lost to Navy 13-17, beat Liberty. That was a good win, 31-16, beat UMass 33-17, blew out Bucknell 63-10, and of course you also beat Air Force 21-14 in overtime. So, for Army, obviously being an independent and also not one of the top teams in the country, this team hasn't really played a very difficult schedule. But for Missouri, being in the SEC, the toughest conference in all of college football, if you look at it, 13 teams, 13 out of 14 of the SEC teams are making it to or are in bowl games in this 2021 season. So, it's a brutal conference that Missouri is in. So they do have more experience playing against tough opponents than Army does, which is something to mention going into this matchup. Some key points: Missouri 6-6, Army is 8-4. Missouri, of course, has played once again a much tougher schedule than Army, but Tyler Beatty, definitely a big impact player. But for Army here, they do have a pretty good rush defense, 111 rush yards allowed per game this season, which is a pretty good stat line there, especially versus Missouri's. But, some key wins here for Missouri. If you want to compare some key wins, Missouri's beaten South Carolina, Florida, and Central Michigan. That first game of the season, actually, for Missouri is going to qualify as a big win because CMU has actually gotten up to an 8-4 record and is one of the better teams in the MAC in this 2021 season. And as for Army, they have a major rushing offense once again. They're averaging nearly 300 rush yards per game this season, which is outstanding. But otherwise, I mean, other than that Navy game, this team has been consistent all year long. They've competed in some big games, and they've gotten some good wins down the stretch. They did beat Liberty, which Liberty's in a bowl game. Western Kentucky's in a bowl game, one of the better teams in their conference. And, of course, you got Georgia State and Air Force also, once again, both. Both of those teams are also in bowl games, and Air Force is one of the top teams in the Mountain West. So, I mean, overall, Army's played pretty well all season long, getting up to that 8-4 record. And otherwise, once again, that Navy game is a pretty big outlier, but, I mean, this team has played pretty solid down the stretch either way. On to the prediction here for Missouri and Army. I'm going to go with Army here, 31-27, and this is a tough one to predict here. I mean, you got two good football teams. Missouri played in a tougher conference, and they're 6-6, and Army, of course, an independent. They haven't really played a tough schedule, but, I mean, they're still a good football team. There's no doubt there. But I just feel like this is a tough matchup here for Missouri, going up against one of the best. I mean, if you look at Missouri here, Missouri's rush defense is allowing 229, once again, rush yards a game. And if you're looking at Army's offense, I mean, that's all you need to know. I mean, Army's offense is heavy on the rushing side. Nearly 300 rush yards a game is what Army is averaging right now. So that does definitely concern me. And honestly, I would be going with Missouri here because of their strength of schedule if it weren't for that. I mean, that's a pretty big stat line and definitely a key factor in this game. So I'm going to go with Army here in a close one. Both teams can still win this game. There's no doubt. I mean, Army's coming off of a tough loss to Navy there, so we'll see how they respond. But then again, Missouri is also coming off of a tough loss to Arkansas. But yeah, so probability, I'm going to go 55% towards Army. Definitely a close game. Both teams can definitely win this one. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Missouri were to pull it out. So it's a tough one, that's for sure. And your over-under is 58.5. I'm going to take the under for this game, just barely. You have 58 total points, and I do expect Army to cover as well, the current 3.5-point spread. But anyway, that wraps it up for me today. Let me know your thoughts and comments below on this matchup. And I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Once again, my prediction here for this game, 31-27, Army getting the win. Appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you later.